Right, my name is Tony, and really thank you very much for the state for being patient with us, that you're here today to participate in this presser. We are glad that you are always responsive, and especially within a very short time, short notice. Before us we have the chairperson of SRC, Lyn Mengich, right in the middle. On the side, on her right, we have Commissioner John K. Monyoncho, and on the chairperson's left, we have the CEO, Commission Secretary, CEO of SRC, Anne Gitao. So before us, we have an agenda to execute. This is on the matter of the state officers' remuneration benefits. In the public services is for the period 2023, 2024, 2024, 2025, third remuneration review cycle. So the chairperson will address us on the foregoing, on the matters and the emerging issues as you may have realized or noted in the media. So Chair, I invite you to carry on. Immediately after the chairperson has given her statement, you are free to ask questions. So hold your horses and feel that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, all those present. So this is really about the salary increase under the third remuneration review cycle, which runs from 2023-2024 financial year to 2024-2025 financial year. So the Salaries and Remuneration Commission is alive and aligned to the national discourse on the public expenditure, particularly on wages and salaries. This discourse is consistent with SRC's mandate of ensuring affordability and fiscal sustainability of the public wage bill. SRC is also aware of media stories featured yesterday, the 2nd of July 2024, and today, the 3rd of July 2024, in a section of the media focusing on salary increases for members of parliament and other state officers. SRC takes this early opportunity to clarify that the salary increases for state officers has not been newly gazetted as referenced in the media. SRC set and published a gazette notice on 9th August 2023 as part of the third remuneration and benefits review cycle for state officers and other public officers that would be implemented over a 2-year period, 2023-2024 financial years and 2024-2025 financial year. This review came after a 2-year freeze on pay structures for the period 2021-22 financial year and 2022-2023 financial year on account of the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. The remaining 2 years would be implemented in 2 phases. The review cycle, which is an obligation pursuant to Section 11E of SRC Act, covers the entire public service, both state officers and other public officers. Within the context of affordability and fiscal sustainability, and pursuant to Article 230 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. In view of the emerging fiscal constraints and the proposed budget cuts and existing contractual commitments, and in further consultation with stakeholders, including the National Treasury, SRC has reviewed the setting and advice of pay for the second phase of the implementation for 2024-2025 financial years. Therefore, in consultation with the National Treasury, SRC hereby freezes the upward review of salaries for all state officers and will review the advice for all other officers, taking into account the current realities of the economy, taking into account any contractual commitments and reduced budget so as to ensure affordability and fiscal sustainability of the public wage bill. SRC has been conscious of the need to ensure prudent fiscal sustainability of the public wage bill and has consistently taken measures towards ensuring that public service operates within the prescribed affordability limits. Consequently, the wage bill has come down from 54.77% of revenue in 2020-21 to 46.64% in 2022-2023. The wage bill is expected to further decline to 35% of revenue by 2028. SRC welcomes the support from all quarters to join efforts towards the goal of achieving the 35% wage bill to revenue ratio. Thank you. So we shall now take questions that you may have.
Questions? Name.
Here, Anthony. My name is Mwangi Maina from Yoro TV. The gazettement that we had done in last year, and as you have exactly said, it was supposed to take effect in 2 phases. It means already in the last financial year that began on 1st of July 2023, that there was an increment that was effected that time. So what happens to that increment that state officers already received at that particular time? And then the second question, your commission, and particularly you as a chair, you have been coming under fire from the legislators, especially the MPs, when maybe you remove the sitting allowances and reduce their salaries. But now the MPs and the senators they have come together to support the SRC to freeze the increment of the salaries. Do you believe that the MPs and all the legislators have taken the advantage of the situation in the country to support what SRC will be doing? Do you believe that the MPs have been hiding their hands in the sand, pretending they don't know the situation that has been in the country? Thank you.
All right, let's take another one. Take more. Well, I think in Chair you can respond to that.
Okay, on the first one, you have asked what happens to the increase that was already implemented in the last financial year. As you rightly say, the implementation was in 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Before any implementation, we consult with the National Treasury and it is budgeted accordingly. So the review for the last financial year was budgeted and therefore it will continue to apply. What is frozen is what would have been implemented in this financial year. But we are now taking into account the fiscal constraint and the budgetary cuts that you are all aware that the government has clearly stated that there will be budgetary cuts. So it will therefore impact what would have been implemented from 1st July this year. The second question you have asked is whether the MPs and senators are taking advantage of the situation because they are now rallying behind SRC and saying we support the freeze. As a commission, we support all stakeholders who are aligned with what we have always talked about. We have always talked about the wage bill needs to be reduced. We are cognizant that in the last one, especially today and even yesterday, a number of MPs have come out strongly to support the position that SRC has always taken. And they have indicated that they are actually supporting a freeze. So to that extent, we take into account such views. It is good for us. It is what we have always fought for. We've always asked the MPs and senators to be cognizant of the financial constraints. So as a commission, we are happy to hear that they are on board and that they will now work with us to actually ensure that we get to the 35% of wage bill to revenue ratio.
Question. My name is Kenna from People Daily. I just wanted to know, in terms of figures, if you could give us the figures, how much the increase would have been, how many billions in terms of figures, how many billions? And then you said you talked to stakeholders. Were unions included in that talk, like the civil servants union and the doctors union and all that? You have had a tussle with the medics.
Okay.
You have a question? Okay. Last question.
Chair, I'm wondering, the conversation has already started in terms of wage bill. When you talk about state officers, because I mean, that's where largely the problem lies. What are the low-hanging fruits? Have you identified what, if we were to go the way of pay cuts or removal of allowances, what are the low-hanging fruits and what will you be targeting as a commission?
Okay, let me first start with the question about the numbers. The actual increase for everybody, all public officers, including the state officers, would be about 22 billion, right? The state officers, all of them, including the members of parliament, the judiciary, the commissions, the county governments, is less than 1 billion, right? So out of the 22 state officers, is only 860 million. It's less than 1 billion. So if you look at percentage of state officers to the entire wage bill, you can work out. So it is almost 1 divided by 22, right? So just to paint the context that state officers actually is a very small percentage, and Monyoncho can give us the percentage. As I answer the issue about the trade unions, were they involved? Now, you will notice that in my statement, I did say we will take into account any contractual commitments, because where there is an existing CBA, then obviously we cannot just say it will be frozen. So we have engaged the National Treasury in terms of funding, and it is clear that the country cannot afford the entire review as earlier proposed. However, we then must also take into account any contractual obligations, and therefore they will be engaged in the normal manner that is stated insofar as collective bargaining negotiations are concerned. Okay?
Low-hanging fruits.
Then there was the low-hanging...
Just go ahead.
Okay, you've asked about the low-hanging fruits. It was your question. In terms of the low-hanging fruits, you may be aware that 2 years ago, the Commission started a process to streamline allowances. And we've engaged the media quite a number of times on that process of streamlining allowances. And we've faced implementation into 4 phases, right? The phase 1 of that implementation was about the allowances for state officers. And in that process, we abolished plenary sitting allowances, both at the National Assembly, which includes the Senate, and also at the county governments. In that same review, we also abolished the car grants for state officers who are enjoying a car grant. You'll be aware that car grant means that every 4 years, a state officer was being allocated 10 million to buy a personal car in addition to the official car. So every 4 years, there was a 10 million. So that was done for state officers, but you will also be aware that there has been a ruling, a judgment in the court insofar as the judiciary is concerned. But for the other state officers, that has been abolished and will continue to be so. So that was phase 1. We then commenced on phase 2 of those allowances, which largely looked at what is cutting across, allowances that cuts across. And you may then be aware that in that phase, we, for example, pronounced ourselves on allowances such as task force. We looked at daily subsistence allowance, what it would look like. We also addressed salaries for retreat allowance, and we also looked at salaries for vice chancellors in universities. So that was phase 2, which was looking at allowances that cut across. We are now in phase 3 of that review, and that now is where we will pick the remaining allowances that are institution specific. So that process has commenced. We haven't yet concluded the stakeholder engagement, but it is definitely an opportunity that presents itself to really look at allowances. We believe as a commission that will help us to quickly get to the 35%. So it is in progress, but we have started on phase 1 and phase 2. The percentage.
It's 5%. I mean, it's 1 billion over 22 billion.
That's 5%.
It's about 4.5, 4.6%.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Cynthia Nyango from Ramogi. The citizens out there, like what you're addressing today is basically on the increment. But out there, the issue is not just about the increment. It is also about what is already existing. So not just talking about the allowances. Is there a way SRC is thinking of probably doing some pay cuts and allowances so that the citizens can feel like you are also with us in this? Because it's not just about this addition. It's also about what is already existing. And so is SRC thinking of going that route?
I agree that the citizens have spoken, and it is actually consistent. Oh, we take more. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so it is true that the citizens have spoken. It is in line with what is stipulated in the Public Finance Act, which clearly stipulates that the wage bill should not be more than 35%. I have shared where we are, which is 46%. So the measures that the Commission has put in place and were discussed at length during the last wage bill conference is exactly to do that. How do we get to 35%? So it's not just about saying, can we freeze? It is beyond that to saying, what do we need to do to get to the 35%, because that is what is the commitment. And the measures will, yes, include the allowances, definitely. Your specific question is, will it include salary cuts? Now, remember, when it comes to a salary cut, there is also the law, which then we have to contend with. For example, when you look at the ILO recommendations, is you cannot just arbitrarily cut pay. And Kenya is a signatory to a number of these conventions in ILO, and even in Kenya as it is at the moment in the Employment Act. It cannot be arbitrarily done. It is not saying it can never be done, but it is something that you can only do with taking the law into account. But the other issue to consider, even as we engage on this discussion, is where is the problem today in terms of the wage bill in Kenya? Is it the actual amount, or is it that as a percentage of revenue there is a problem? Now, there is a problem because as a percentage of revenue it is consuming more resources than it should. That is the wage bill itself. But if we look at the salaries in absolute terms for a number of the public officers, it is actually way below the market, right? Because remember also, we have an obligation to attract the right people to deliver the right services to the citizens. For example, if today we said we do not want to pay the right salary for doctors, and you don't attract them and they go to other countries, then the country loses overall. So we have to balance the discussion to how can we ensure that we are still recruiting the right skills to deliver the public services at the standard that the public deserves, but again, not at the expense of development by shifting all the resources towards that area. So it's a fair balance that we have to work through, but I really want to say it's important to realize that not all public servants, their pay is not even at 50% of the market. We've talked about 50th percentile when we last engaged the media, and we did share that a number of public officers are at around 30 to 40 percentile of the market. That's not a very high salary, right? But then the question then is, where is the balance? We still must attract and retain, but we also don't want to consume a wage bill that then unfairly takes away resources from development and public services. So the answer is yes, it is looking at everything, but please let's have it in balance. We cannot say cut pay without thinking about what is the impact. Will you be able to attract the right skills to provide the services that the citizens deserve at the right quality and standards as required.
Chair, I think the big question is, today listening to the Senate, they were saying they are willing to take the pay cut. Question is, from your end, what are the modalities of ensuring that happens?
The modalities for a pay cut is that you engage. As I said, in fact, what the law says is you cannot arbitrarily cut it. It doesn't say you cannot cut. So that means then that we then have an engagement with that stakeholder through, in this case, when you talk about MPs and Senate, that is the Parliamentary Service Commission. They have expressed desire that they are willing to have a pay cut. We would definitely be more than happy to go that direction because they have expressed the interest to do that. So it is not impossible. It can be done. My question was, it's not an arbitrarily cutting pay without taking into account other considerations. So yes, it can be done.
Maybe one last one. In conjunction with what Kyrian asked on the low-hanging fruits. My name is Mwangi minority. On the low-hanging fruits to ensure that we contain our wage bill, you have only spoken about the issue of allowances. Yet, according to me, when I look at some of the provisions we are giving state officers and public servants, I think it is much more than just allowances. For example, why do we give the president, the deputy, the prime cabinet secretary a house allowance, whereas they have an official residence? How about the airtime that we are giving to state officers for 20,000 a month? How much money does SRC pay in form of allowances to those state officers? Do you think we have much more we can do apart from the allowances only?
In the same line, just the issue of junior officers. What is your message when they hear the police officers and all that, those ones who are anticipating a cost of 2,000 or 3,000 shillings? What do you tell them?
Okay, let me start with the first one. You have mentioned specifically house allowance and airtime. Now remember, there are also allowances. So really, in terms of the pay structure for public service, there are three structures. There is the basic salary, there is the allowances, then there is the benefits. So when it comes to, apart from basic, everything else is allowance. So to the extent that even the two you have mentioned is part of the allowance. So it will be part of that review. The others are now benefits, which is medical, mortgage. And that's a different discussion now because that is actually just a benefit. Then let me come to the specific question you are asking. What do we tell the public officers at the lower level in terms of this pay review? As I mentioned earlier, what we have done at the moment is freezing for state officers. For the others, we shall review, again to emphasize, taking into account any contractual obligations. For example, in the civil service, they have a trade union. The teachers also have a trade union, which means that we will not just, just make pronouncements and say this is what will look like. But I also want to emphasize the fact that we must not lose sight of the fact that we have another obligation to ensure that the salaries also have, are not necessarily very high, but it's got to enable the public service to attract and retain. The same public officer also has a right to fair remuneration, which is an important part of the whole discussion. And what does fair remuneration mean to a public officer? It actually means, as the SRC Act mandates the Commission to carry out labor studies, in other words, salary surveys, to establish the trend in the market. I did share with you earlier that today we are operating in a number of public officer institutions below 40%. So surely for that cadre, we cannot say, let's just cut pay, because we must speak to. They are also entitled to fair pay, a pay that will attract and retain. So in short, we will review taking into account all those, not just the budgetary constraint, which is important. If Treasury says we can't afford, we can't afford. But we also must take into account all the other parameters to have a fair, balanced view on what happens to the pay for the other public officers.
Two more last.
George Maringa, 47. A conversation that, of course, the young people, as you say, you've listened to Kenyans and Kenyans have spoken. The conversation has been in terms of ensuring that these offices are more of service rather than opulence. So they were comparing, for instance, you saw the Prime Minister of the Netherlands living by a bicycle, the office. And when you come to this part of the continent, sub-Saharan Africa, these offices seem more of personal gain rather than service delivery. In terms of that conversation, are you also factoring in, when you look at some of these things, surely some of the leaders in this country, they're not so much under threat if you look at, the global leaders, if you even consider the number of security officers you allow, the pay that comes to such, officers and all that. Are you also considering, in terms of ensuring that this looks more of service? Because that's also a conversation that the young people and whoever is speaking against this and the salaries conversation says, let it be that these guys work for us, not we are working for them.
You're right. I mean, previously we were all called public servants. Okay, we changed it and called it public officers. I don't know whether that shifted the conversation, but that does not remove the fact that public officers are public servants, in the sense that it is the public that is paying us. Yeah, we are paid out of taxes that is paid by everyone. So we agree absolutely that public service must be a service. You have specifically given the example of, do we need all the security that goes with our offices and everything else? And you have also compared to other countries. I've seen prime ministers, you're right, who ride a bike, or they are walking with the office with their back, because that's their country. And you're right to say the observation is in this part of the continent, not just Kenya, in Africa generally, we seem to have a different way of managing that. Now, when it comes to security requirements, it's actually not within the mandate of the Commission. Because if you are to look at the gazette notices, all we have said security is as advised by the Inspector General of Police. So we do not get into that because it's not within our mandate. But what I do agree absolutely is public officers are public servants and ought to display the demeanor of service. And we are here to serve the public, not to serve ourselves. And the Constitution is very clear about that. In terms of prudent use of public resources, it's very clear. And how we are expected as public officers to carry out the public trust. Because obviously the public, our offices is on trust. The public is giving us that opportunity to serve them. So we then must find a way to restore public trust. And it can be done. And I urge you, even as the media, to work with all of us. We are one country. We are one nation. How can we restore that public trust? And yes, public officers have a lot of work to do, that we must therefore display ourselves differently. But I urge the media, please work with us. This is our country. We need to restore public trust. And you play a very, very important role in doing exactly that. And for our young citizens, our Gen Zs, our young people, we are listening and we hear you. And we agree with you absolutely. Our positions, we are here to serve. And our positions are positions of trust. And we have an obligation to ensure proper utilization of public resources to be able to serve the citizens of this country. But please work with us, that we work together to build a better Kenya. Thank you.
Yes, that I believe wraps up perfectly. You seem to have a very burning, right?
You just said something that I think I really want to clarify. One of the things that Gen Zs talked about, I see you are rewarding productivity. But to hear somebody saying, my MP does not actually deliver, I do not see them giving out what I should get. I mean, this is someone you're paying like $1 million, but what is giving me as a person who is actually paying him is not up to that. Do you still see that it's right to add them something on top, when actually they don't give us what we deserve. Like, okay, you might be looking at market, what market rate is, but what if market rate is there, but there's no productivity, there's no, yeah.
I like your question. During the last wage bill conference, and I want to believe most of you were part of it, one of the themes was productivity. And the challenge that we even pose to all the audience is we pride ourselves as having the best talent in Africa. And I agree, we have the best talent. So why is our productivity low? And it is very low. In Africa, you will recall we gave the numbers. We are ranked 22nd out of 53. In the world, we were ranking 162, was it? 168.
Yes.
So I agree in terms of that conversation as a country, what is happening? Why is our productivity very low? And coming home, how do we hold public officers, and here public officers include state officers, accountable so that they can also account for their services? And I would urge you, because you're in the media, look at Rwanda as an example, right? They have a method, a system, where every year the citizens hold their governors onto account. They have a forum, I've forgotten the local name, but we need to get back there as a country where all of us, including me, can come to the public and say, what have I done this year, right? We go back to accountability to the citizens. And that is what we were advocating in the wage bill conference, a method where all public officers, where all cabinet secretaries can be held account and the citizens can ask questions. They can bring their scorecard and tell us, this is where I have reached. So it is in discussion. The government agreed, and it is one of the resolutions, that we need to be more accountable to the citizens, and we need to put in place mechanisms where the citizens can ask those tough questions that you rightly said. What have you done for me? You know, we elected you. Just tell us, what is it you have done for me in my constituency? So it is time, and it is ripe for us to have that conversation around accountability, and for the citizens to hold all of us, including your elected representative, accountable to demonstrate what they have done for the citizens.
Can the commissioners be on part-time basis, because it's the executive that does the work in order to cut the wages?
First of all, let me go back to, I did share the numbers that the entire state officers is only 5% of the wage bill. If you are to ask, they're even below 0 point something. So if, for example, this commission was part-time, would it be cheaper for Kenya? The answer is no. Previous commission was on part-time. Part-time means that you're paid allowance every time you come to transact the commission's business. The salaries we earn today is lower than what the part-time commission was earning. So the discussion that sometimes, people think is that it is cheaper to have part-time commissions, we can show you the numbers. It is more expensive. In fact, any part-time commission today earns more than the full-time commissions. And the other advantage of a full-time commission is that our time entirely is devoted to the commission. If you make our commissions part-time, we earn more, and we do other business. So actually it doesn't benefit the citizens at all. Thank you.
If you need the statement, it's available softly over there. We will give it to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.